moving towards some kind of diplomacy. The diplomacy has been fragile, and what you pointed out is really at the core, at the heart of the problem, is that there is no trust between the two sides. The U.S. doesn't trust Iran. Iran does not trust the U.S. Iran doesn't trust Israel. Israel is very hostile toward Iran and does not trust it. So basically, I think this is one of the main problems. But at the same time, I think the danger of escalation, nobody knows where and how this is going to end. Or we're already beginning to see some of the consequences. We're seeing, for example, the attacks on the Gulf states by Iran. And basically, these are attacks on some of the airports. Mainly, I think they were trying to reach
and some of the United States' closest allies.
Exactly. These are close allies, but I think the Iranians were trying to attack U.S. bases, and some of the areas that the U.S. forces are present in. But at the same time that this is happening, we're also seeing that, for example, the UAE, Qatar, the Gulf states tried the Saudi Arabia, which were actually not on the best of terms with Iran previously. Nevertheless, in recent weeks and months, they reached out to the United States, through the UN, through other Europeans, to try to influence the United States not to launch an attack, not to join Israel. But apparently they were ignored. They were ignored when they appealed to avoid the 2003 war in Iraq. The Gulf states were ignored. And now in 2026, these were close allies of the United States, told the United States that the consequences would be very dangerous for everyone, for them especially, and that the war should be avoided. And yet they were ignored. At the same time, I'm sure if they think that the regime is going to collapse, and they may end up being somewhat happy with that or pleased with that. But I think the dangers are much more so. We're just hearing now about that Iran may have closed the Straits of Hormuz. Have they? We don't know for sure. But clearly the Iranians have told ships that are going through the Hormuz Strait, telling them to avoid the Hormuz Strait. And that already, from what I've read and heard, that already a lot of ships are avoiding. That means this is going to have dramatic consequences.
Economic impact as well. All right, Edmund, don't go anywhere. We're going to continue our coverage on U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran. It's important to point out what China is saying in all this. China's foreign ministry says Iran's sovereignty and territorial integrity must be respected. I spoke to Victor Gao, the chair professor at Soochow University earlier, and he shared his thoughts on China's role in potentially diffusing the crisis.
The United States and Israel are engaged in this war of aggression against Iran, violating Iran's sovereignty and territorial integrity. And the Chinese government emphasized that Iran's sovereignty and territorial integrity should be fully respected. And China is calling for de-escalation and ceasefire immediately, because otherwise you do not know how much evil this whole situation may degenerate in, because this may degenerate into a regional war or even with more global implications, because first of all, energy security will be undermined, and it may also lead to a big financial crisis. So the world itself will suffer the consequences of this unwanted war launched by the United States and Israel against a sovereign country. And Iran is now exercising full right of self-defense against the aggressors.
Victor, what about when it comes to international law and UN Charter? Do these military actions by U.S. and Israel violate those?
Absolutely. I think in this particular case, Israel committed act of aggression against Iran, and the United States aided and abetted Israel and joined in this act of aggression against Iran. By international law, there should be no doubt that Iran is under attack and is suffering the consequences of this aggression. And I think Iran has full justification to fight back. Now, several countries, including Prime Minister of Britain, said Iran has been attacking several other countries. It's because these countries host U.S. military bases. And from these military bases, acts of aggression has been committed by the U.S. troops and military facilities based in these countries. And I think by international law, Iran has full justification to strike back. But of crucial importance is what China is calling for: de-escalation and ceasefire, and go back to the negotiation table. It is truly a double standard for the United States to engage in negotiation all the time until the moment they struck at Iran.
Yeah, you make a good point, because the last time Israel and United States hit Iran, they were also in the middle of negotiations back in June, with the Omanis playing the role of the mediators. And Oman's foreign minister gave a number of interviews, and he said he was optimistic that the two sides could work something out and avert a military crisis. Let me move on to the United Nations Security Council. What can we expect from the UNSC? What should we expect? And can they, at this point, really do anything? Victor, you know, there's a lot of people that say the UN has become rather irrelevant. They say a lot of things, but nothing really ever happens.
Well, I think the United Nations Security Council need to come into an immediate emergency session right away to deliberate about this particular war of aggression against Iran. However, I don't think it is realistic to expect anything substantive coming out of the Security Council, because the United Nations will definitely exercise its veto power.
Victor, my final question to you is, the relationship between China and the United States is often described as the most important bilateral relationship in the world. Is this crisis going to affect that relationship?
Well, China-U.S. relations are the most consequential and impactful bilateral relations in the world of today. I think, and I believe, China has the ability